I remember what it was like going to the theater in 1996 to watch Scream. I remember what it was like the first time seeing that movie and the first time being scared by the opening and the first time walking out and saying, man, Wes Craven made a good movie. And then, of course, a year later, we got Scream 2, which wasn't as good, but still fun. And then a few years down the road, we got Scream 3, complete with its Jay and Silent Bob cameo, which was wild to say the least. And then 11 years later, we got Scream 4. And even that movie now is almost 8.5 years old. And it was a fun movie. I saw it midnight show, Burbank 16 in Los Angeles. Had a lot of fun with it. And then after that, Wes Craven died. And it felt like the Scream franchise, at least in movie form, at least in this particular timeline, these characters were going to die with it. And that is okay. It's for the best. When the original director is gone and you can't team up with the original writer, Kevin Williamson, it's definitely something that you want to see them walk away from. However, as we're finding out today, Scream 5 or Scream reboot is going to be happening. Spyglass Entertainment picked up the rights from the Weinsteins who owned it via Dimension. And they are planning on teaming up with Lantern Entertainment, who produced the other 4 films, to do some kind of new entry with the Ghostface Killer. Now, part of me is interested to see what happens with this, considering that it's been over 20 years since the original came out, 8 years since the last movie came out. But at the same time, I don't want there to be another Scream movie. MTV tried it with Scream. They did, I think, 2 TV shows. And the second season was like a soft reboot of the first show. I think, I don't know. I never watched it. I heard it was okay. And it makes sense to have it as a TV series. But with the, with the Grudge coming back and these other horror movies being remade, they obviously want to recapitalize on everything else. And I get it too, because if you look here, if you look here, just at the numbers.com, I'm looking at it right now. Out of all 4 movies, they had a total production budget of $119 million for 4 films. And it had a worldwide take home of $603 million, not including home video sales, not including soundtrack or merch or streaming or syndication rights. All of those things will factor into an overall budget. But still, when you have nearly a 5 times or 6, about a 5 times return on investment, it does make sense to want to come back and go down into that well again. But at the same time, it's like people don't want that as much anymore. I mean, The Lion King kind of says otherwise. Aladdin kind of says otherwise, but that's Disney and that's a totally different thing. But horror movies and remakes are pretty common. But I think horror movie fans, like diehard horror movie fans, are not going to want to dive back into this well without there being something of significant value. If there's no value to this property, if it's just a continuation of Officer Dewey, right down the road, it's just, they're bringing back Nev Campbell, David Arquette, Courtney Cox, like, are they going to come back? It just seems like it's pointless. Now, I would argue that they could try perhaps to contemporize Scream, and have it be about social media. But if I recall correctly, wasn't Scream 4 kind of about social media? Wasn't that a big thing back in 2011 when Wes Craven made that movie? Right? The biggest thing for me in all this is that Wes Craven won't be involved. Just when Wes Craven franchise doesn't have Wes Craven involved, it does feel pretty bad. Right? Go back to 2010 when you had the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, sure. Like it looked newer and felt newer and some things were scarier than the original, but you didn't have the charm that Wes Craven brings to his directorial efforts. You didn't have Robert Englund in the role. You had Jackie Earle Haley, who was good, but not what people wanted. And even though Ghostface Killer is not a charismatic killer, and it could be anyone wearing the mask, it still doesn't feel right not having Wes Craven involved. But then again, Spyglass is also rebooting Hellraiser and is being written by David S. Goyer and not Clive Barker. So it's kind of like, again, they bought the rights to these movies. They bought the rights to these franchises. They want to capitalize on nostalgia and they want to just drive it into the ground. when I think more fans would be interested in original horror movies and original stories rather than rehashes and retreads of things we can already watch on home video. We need to stop being on board with these. And there are some times where they're interesting to check out. Like, will I watch Scream 5 or Scream Reboot? Yeah, I will, because I'll be genuinely curious to see how they pull it off. And look, they could actually pull it off. I have no idea. They could pull it off. But in the meantime, it's also not something that I, as a horror movie fan, am going to even be remotely asking for. I would rather see something new and original that gets me scared than something old and outdated that I already basically can figure out the ending to within the first 5 minutes. And without the charm of Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven, I just don't necessarily see this picking up the steam that they want. But then again, like with all the Disney remakes of original animated classics, they're opening it up to a whole new audience of people who weren't alive back in the day when these came out. It's been 23 years since Scream 1. There's a lot of kids who were born after December 20th, 1996 that are never going to have experienced Scream. And so to Spyglass, this is a whole new genre or a whole new audience of people to tap into. But they still have the originals, and the originals are still great. But remakes are going to remake, and there ain't much we can do about it when there's potentiality of budgets to be, money to be made. Especially when the first movie here, it says only cost $15 million to make. And if they keep it on a lower budget, it could be financially viable to do. Because that's kind of where we are with horror. As I've talked about this, horror movies are going to ultimately save the box office, because you can make something compelling and interesting on a shoestring budget and rack up big money. Whereas tentpole movies spend a lot of money and may crash and burn, costing the studio hundreds of millions, like in the case of Terminator Dark Fate. Anyway, your thoughts, your opinions on this one. Do you think Scream is going to be good? Think it's going to be bad? Think it's going to be in the middle? I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. If you made it this far, type Scream into the chat so I know. And please thumbs up the video, subscribe, and all that jazz. Have yourself a great day, guys, and peace out. This video is supported by patrons like you. If you'd like to become a patron, please head over to patreon.com/Matt Jarbo.